It goes without saying that The Silence of the Lambs is one of the greatest movies ever made. It is ranked number 23 on IMDb's list of greatest movies of all time, and it got nominated for 7 Oscars, winning 5 of them. Additionally, the 5 Oscars that it won are called the Big Five. They are Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Best Actress in a Leading Role, and Best Adapted Screenplay. So yeah, it's not a hot take when I say this movie is pretty freaking great. Nonetheless, there is one thing that does not get talked about enough. This thing is Hannibal Lecter's eyes and how he uses them to take power. If you pay close attention to Hannibal's eyes, you will quickly learn that Hannibal has a photographic memory. Let's take a look at this fact and more by analyzing the first time that Hannibal appears in the film. Clarice walks up to Hannibal's cell and introduces herself as an FBI agent. When Clarice shows Hannibal her credentials, he looks at the credentials for a split second, yet he reads the entire thing. We know he read the entire thing because he immediately points out the fact that it expires in 1 week.
That expires in 1 week. You're not real FBI, are you?
I'm still in training at the academy.
He sees what's in front of him all at once, instantly, just like a photograph. The second example of Hannibal's photographic memory in this scene is an even more blatant display. Clarice and Hannibal continue to talk until Clarice changes the subject of the conversation by asking about Hannibal's drawings.
Did you do all these drawings, Doctor?
The script describes the drawings as extraordinarily detailed, and it is clear visually that they are almost picture perfect. Yet, as Hannibal reveals, he drew them all just from his memory.
All that detail just from memory, sir?
Memory, Agent Starling, is what I have instead of a view.
So clearly, from Hannibal's first scene alone, the fact is established that Hannibal has a photographic memory and incredible powers of perception. So that's very cool. But how does this fact make the movie better? It is because it makes Hannibal much more powerful and therefore much more terrifying. Hannibal spends the majority of this first scene staring deep into Clarice. So if Hannibal can completely understand her credentials from a half-second long glance, he must be developing a deep understanding of Clarice as he locks his sight onto her throughout the scene. He even smells her to increase his perception of her. Furthermore, Hannibal is frightening due to how he uses his powers of perception. Hannibal analyzes Clarice, dissecting her clothes, body, and actions, and then he throws what he has found right back into her face. He points out her cheap shoes and tells her how he knows she is not more than 1 generation from poor white trash.
But you're not more than 1 generation from poor white trash, are you, Agent Starling? And that accent you've tried so desperately to shed, pure West Virginia. What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land?
From one brief conversation, Hannibal has dissected Clarice in a manner she has never encountered before. An adversary who knows you better than you know yourself is truly frightening. However, despite Hannibal's hurtful attack, Clarice is brave. She continues her mission to get information from Hannibal. She even challenges Hannibal to point that high-powered perception back at himself.
You see a lot, Doctor. But are you strong enough to point that high-powered perception at yourself? What about it? Why don't you look at yourself and write down what you see? Maybe you're afraid to.
Hannibal's powerful, terrifying nature creates the opportunity for our protagonist to shine. This is truly excellent story and filmmaking. The villain is totally terrifying, but our hero does not back down. And it all starts from the eyes of Hannibal the Cannibal. Of course, Hannibal's first scene is not the only time his eyes are used to create brilliant filmmaking. Let's move to Hannibal's next scene. At this point, the relationship between the two characters has been set up. Hannibal has information about the active serial unaliver Buffalo Bill, and Clarice wants this information from Hannibal so that she can catch Bill. This character dynamic is visually represented in this meeting via the vision of both characters. As the two talk about Buffalo Bill, Hannibal is in darkness, so he can see Clarice, but Clarice cannot see Hannibal. This reflects how Hannibal sees information about Buffalo Bill, but Clarice does not. Further, once the conversation moves away from the topic of Buffalo Bill, the lights come on. This is because the power dynamic deriving from knowledge about Buffalo Bill should no longer be visually represented on screen, because they're not talking about it anymore. Additionally, the lights in Hannibal's cell are outside of his control. However, when they come on, Hannibal closes his eyes. This is a subtle way for Hannibal to maintain his power over the situation. Hannibal will see the light when he chooses to, not when someone else decides it's time for them to come on. Anyway, the scene continues, and the only other significant detail about Hannibal and his eyes that appears is another example of Hannibal's photographic memory. Hannibal says to Clarice that he will make a deal with her. He will tell Clarice about Buffalo Bill in exchange for a transfer to a prison cell with a view.
What I want is a view. I want a window where I can see a tree, or even water.
When Hannibal describes the view that he wants, it is one of the rare times he looks away from Clarice. He gazes at the blank wall, but he isn't really looking at the wall. He is looking through his mind's eye as he recalls the view that he is describing. He sees an image of trees and water. However, he doesn't want to use his memory anymore. He wants to see them with his real eyes again. In this scene, the vision of each character and Hannibal's purposely directed gaze are clear examples of expert filmmaking. Let's move on to Hannibal's third scene. The scene starts with Clarice presenting Hannibal with an offer. The offer entails that if Hannibal helps Clarice catch Buffalo Bill, then Hannibal will be moved to a prison cell with a view.
To the VA hospital at Oneida Park, New York, with a view of the woods nearby.
Clarice passes the details of the offer through to Hannibal, but Hannibal waits. He does not scurry to the papers like a rat being fed cheese. He chooses his own time to read the papers. This is a simple example of how Hannibal takes power despite his powerless confinement. It is very similar to when Hannibal chose when to see the light in the scene prior. Hannibal then looks over the offer and adds a caveat to the deal. He will only accept the offer if, for every detail of Buffalo Bill that he reveals to Clarice, Clarice, in turn, reveals details about herself to Hannibal.
Quid pro quo. I tell you things, you tell me things. Not about this case, though. About yourself.
Although Clarice doesn't want to open up to Hannibal, she will not let that stop her from solving the case. Therefore, this is a deal that Clarice cannot and will not refuse. Hannibal knows this. By presenting Clarice with this offer, not only does Hannibal get information about Clarice, but he also takes power in the inter-character dynamic by making sure that the deal is his deal. He made the final say, not the FBI, not Clarice. For this scene, the final note about Hannibal comes when Clarice describes the death of her father.
What is your worst memory of childhood?
The death of my father.
Tell me about it and don't lie, or I'll know.
When she describes it, Hannibal looks away from her. This is similar to when he looked away when describing the view that he wanted. Whatever Hannibal looks at is extremely potent in his mind. So when he wishes to imagine something in his mind's eye, like trees and water, or like the images of Clarice's story, he's going to look at something uninteresting or blank. This is what he's doing here. As Clarice explains the story from her childhood, Hannibal builds his perception of her. Hannibal's next experience comes while he is in the process of being moved to a new prison. During the transfer, Hannibal's entire body is visibly restrained, except for his eyes. Hannibal is brought in front of the senator, whose daughter has been kidnapped by the serial unaliver Buffalo Bill. The first thing Hannibal does is establish a positive rapport with the senator. He expresses concern for the senator's daughter and informs her of Buffalo Bill's real name.
Buffalo Bill's real name is Louis Friend.
By immediately creating this positive association between himself and the senator is much more likely to continue to converse with Hannibal once he starts causing her pain. Which, of course, he then begins to do. Hannibal causes the senator pain by asking her to recall the childhood of her currently kidnapped daughter.
Tell me, Senator, did you nurse Catherine yourself?
What?
Did you breastfeed her?
He continues by asking the senator to imagine all of the horrible things that Buffalo Bill is currently doing to her child.
Tell me, Mom, when your little girl is on the slab, where will it tickle you?
This causes the senator clear distress and pain, so she turns around to leave. Then, Hannibal reveals even more information about Buffalo Bill. This causes the senator to turn back around so that Hannibal can further feast on the distraught on her face. Hannibal plays this cat and mouse game with the senator so that not only does he inflict pain onto her, but he can also see her in pain and then remember it forever using his photographic memory. Hannibal enjoys seeing other people in pain, and his photographic memory and brilliant mind allow him to revel in those images forever. He is an evil mastermind, and he uses his eyes for his personal sadistic satisfaction. This is a truly scary villain. In Hannibal's next scene, Clarice uses phony credentials to get one last meeting with Hannibal. In this meeting, Clarice desperately wants Hannibal to tell her more information about Buffalo Bill before the guards realize her credentials are phony and escort her away. Hannibal is willing to tell Clarice the name, but only if Clarice tells him the final piece of Clarice's painful childhood story. So, the scene begins, and due to the motives and situation I've just explained, Hannibal once again has control over the situation, despite being a literal prisoner. So, having no other choice, Clarice finishes her painful recollection, and we get a masterpiece of scene. Clarice exposes her most painful and significant memory to Hannibal, and he feasts upon her display of hurt. This scene is utterly enthralling as Clarice fully opens up to her new, twisted father figure, and he enjoys her innermost pain. The tension of the scene fades as Clarice finishes her story, and the guards remove her as Hannibal passes her the information she wanted. The next time we see Hannibal is his escape scene. I want to hit a couple points about Hannibal's eyes here. Number one, there is a portrait that Hannibal drew of Clarice that is extremely accurate, despite Hannibal having no physical image for reference. This is clear evidence of Hannibal's photographic memory. Number two, during all of the gruesome and evil things Hannibal does in this scene, like bash people's heads in, his eyes never flick away from the gore he unleashes in front of them. This is because he wants to obtain and store a perfect image of the horror show, so that he can recall it later and enjoy it. This is exactly similar to all the other times he leered at people in pain. He points his unwavering gaze directly at the evil images he has caused, so that he can maximally enjoy it forever. The last time we see Hannibal, he has completed his escape and is on a tropical island somewhere. And what do you know? He's got some shades on. I don't think this is any special meaning to analyze, except for the fact that it's sunny out, and while Hannibal is totally cool with brutally unaliving people, eye damage from the sun, that's just too far. In conclusion, Hannibal is a sadistic monster whose entire character can be witnessed by paying close attention to his eyes. This is how you win the Best Leading Actor Oscar in just 16 minutes of screen time. Thank you for watching.